welcome back. Hopefully you had a nice intermission there. And I want to say how wonderful it is to be in Colorado. I think that Colorado wins the prize for having love and respect in its state the most. This is our 6th time to be in Colorado. And thank you for the warm welcome that we have felt being here. Love the view from our hotel. That is just awesome. And last night as we were driving to the church, that pink sunset was, or coming over the mountains was just beautiful. Now, speaking of our hotel, which has been wonderful, this morning I just wanted to warn you that in case I fall asleep speaking to you, it's because I asked for a 5:30 wake-up call, and I got a 4:30 wake-up call, but didn't know it until 5:08 when I was half dressed. So anyway, I just happened to look at a clock. The clock was not beside the telephone that rang. So anyway, I'm sure I'll make it fine. But it is great to be here. And as Emerson has mentioned, we're honored, we are privileged, and we are humbled. When we drove in the parking lot last night and to see all the people that were here at 6 o'clock already, and it just humbles us that you would take the time out of your busy schedule to come and to listen to what we believe is a simple message from God that works. Often people wonder if I am as excited and as enthused about this message as Emerson is. I will say to you, I am as excited, I am as enthused, but I'm not quite as entertaining. And this is the point that I say to the cameraman, you can go to Starbucks right now for the next hour or so because I do not move. I stand right here. And kind of in comparison, I'm basically boring, but I just don't move. So anyway, as I said, I'm not quite as entertaining. And I never quite get as excited about public speaking because that's not really my gift, so this is always a faith venture every time. What I'd really rather be doing right now is having you all over for dinner, but because you won't fit in my kitchen, and because Emerson has asked me to share the practical, out of respect for him, I will do just that. So that's why I'm here. I'm often amused at how people do want to know what I think about this. In fact, like one woman wrote recently and said, I'd just like to know what your wife thinks about this. And I thought to myself, okay, now let me see here. We're doing these marriage conferences together. It's biblical. He even dedicated his book to me. I mean, do you think I'm going to get up and say something different? Or that we're going to, disagree on this? I don't think so. I'm also reminded of a woman who said to Emerson last year, now, Emerson, I've been thinking about your ideas and wondering if you think they work in every situation. And he said, whoa. This isn't my idea. This is God's idea. It's a revelation from Abba Father, and he's just given us the opportunity at this time to share this message. And that's why I say to you, we are honored and privileged to do that. But we are grateful for the opportunities to share this message, whether it's through the conferences, through the book, through interviews. But what we're most excited about is people like you who are coming to listen to this message or reading the book, and then you begin living it out in your life, and you begin sharing it with others. One of our prayers from the very beginning has been that verse that says, and we pray that the word of the Lord would spread rapidly and be glorified. And you will help us do that as you leave this conference today and as you begin living it out, as I said. My husband has said some pretty profound things in the 32 years that I've been married to him, but one of the things that I remember one day when he said to me, Sarah, if God had intended marriage to be complex, he would have put about 1,000 pages past maps in the back of our Bible. Like if you've got this problem, go to this page. If you've got this problem, go to this page. But instead, he brought it down to 2 simple words. And that's the most common response we get from people, is this message is so simple. And you know what? It's 2 words, and you only have to remember one of them. For you men, it's the word love, and for you women, it's the word respect. How much simpler can we get? Another common response that we get is women saying, why hasn't anybody told us this? And men saying, finally, somebody has put into words what I felt, but I didn't know how to say. And I would really encourage you to begin incorporating these words into your vocabulary. As Emerson said, this is about mutual understanding. It's about understanding your spouse's mother tongue. When you begin using the word love and you begin using the word respect on a regular basis in your vocabulary, you would be amazed at what happens. The list that you have in front of you came, which is the next 2 pages in your workbook, came as a result of us meeting in private homes when we first began this ministry back in 1999. We would ask women what would make them feel loved, and we asked men what would make them feel respected, and this is what they said over and over and over again. We are not here because of examples that we had growing up. As Emerson mentioned last night, his parents were divorced and remarried, for which we're very grateful. And if I had the time to tell you about all the divorce in my family, you would think it was an epidemic. But we are here because we made a choice to obey God, and it's a choice that we have to continue to make on a daily basis. As he mentioned, we have been married since 1973. We do have 3 adult children. Our oldest son, Jonathan, is in graduate school, and he, this summer, added to our family a lovely daughter-in-law, or daughter-in-love, as I like to call her, and her name just happens to be Sarah. So guess what? There are now 2 Sarah Eggeriches. Do you know how weird it is to call someone's cell phone and have them say, "Hi, this is Sarah Eggerich. I'm not available right now, but I'll leave me a message and I'll call you back." Every time I get Sarah's cell phone, we call her Sweet Sarah. That's how we distinguish between the 2 of us. Our second son, David, is on staff with us in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's in charge of all our videography and our website. And then our daughter, Joy, which maybe some of you have met, is here with us. I get to see her every weekend that we do a conference, and which is quite a few weekends, and so that's been really delightful. She is directing all of our live conferences now. I like to say that our children are so adult that when they call us, they ask us where we are and when we're getting back. That's how we know they're adult. We're not asking them. We have been getting on this crazy cycle with you for 32 years. How else could we practice what we preach? We're not here to get you off the crazy cycle completely, because none of us will ever do that, because we're all sinners. We're just here to help you recognize when you're on it so that you can reduce the number of times you spend on it and jump off sooner. That's what Emerson and I have learned to do. We get on it. We got on it this week more than once, but we've learned to jump off sooner. We've learned to rebound. It's so freeing when you realize that no relationship is perfect. As he quoted that verse that everyone always laughs at, if you get married, you will have trouble. God told us that if we got married, we would have trouble. And because we will have trouble, we need to add lightness to conflict that is bound to happen. We have some friends who have come to this conference 6 or 7 times. They're definitely groupies now. And one time after, I think about the 3rd conference, they said to us, we've added these little phrases into our relationship now that just really help when we get in conflict. One of them is, "Excuse me, but you're stepping on my air hose?" And the other one is, "Fasten your seatbelts, we're getting on the crazy cycle." And just as you laughed as I said that, this is what it's done in their relationship. And it really does bring lightness and humor to conflict that is bound to happen. But as you listen to these very practical things that I'll go through, I pray another thing, and that is that you would not be sitting there hoping that your spouse will do the things on their list, but that you will just concentrate on how you can serve your spouse. As you know, when you get your mind off of yourself and onto somebody else, it's so, so freeing. Again, we believe it's a simple message. We believe it takes some simple work, but we're convinced it works. As I said, I am excited and I am enthused about this. One of the main reasons is because I'm trying to practice it in my own life. When I put on words of respect or actions of respect towards my husband or my sons, it works. And when I don't, it doesn't work. When they put on words of love or actions of love towards me, it affects my spirit positively. It's just as simple as that. The question becomes, will I do what God has commanded me, independent of what my spouse does? Well, I believe that verse in 1 John 5:13 or 5:3 that says his commands are not burdensome. People, this is a command. Ephesians 5:33 is a command. There's no neutrality. We either will do it or we won't do it. My heart is burdened today that more and more people are not obeying God's command, and it grieves me when I realize that God honors obedience, and yet so many of us still refuse to obey and believe him. You will hear me share some examples about my children, and it's because God didn't really create us married and unmarried. He created us male and female, and you will, as I share some of the examples, it's because I have seen some of these things in our children over the years. But back to this obedience thing, how do you feel when your children don't obey? You give them instruction because you want to spare them pain that will either come to them from you personally, or pain that will come to them from outside consequences due to their disobedience. And it's the same way with God. He gives us commands to spare us pain. And it's just as simple as that. I'm also excited and enthused about this message because I love God. I have a reverence for Him. I fear Him, and I want His blessing in my life. And I trust that you do too. I love that verse that says, "He who sows righteousness reaps a sure reward." And that's what the rewarded cycle is all about. And the rewarded cycle is why Emerson and I are doing this and continue to share this message. It's just a commitment and a decision that I have made to do this as unto Him. Ask yourself if what you're presently doing is working. If it isn't, listen up to some of these things that we'll be going through, and better yet, just begin trying some of them. Again, it's simple, takes some simple work, but we are convinced that it works. And as I go through these, hopefully you'll see the balance that God was trying to bring to marriage and was into equality long before our culture ever started talking about it. Another prayer that we've prayed from the very beginning, and that is my prayer for you now, is from 1 Thessalonians 2:13 that says, "And I pray that you would receive this not as the word of man, but as the very word of God, which is able to perform its work in you who believe." So let's get started. And we will look, men, at what the women said over and over again in these home groups where we were testing out this material. And again, it's going to vary from person to person and culture to culture, but basically, these are pretty much on the mark as to what most women feel. Under the area of closeness, a woman feels close to you and face-to-face or heart-to-heart, and therefore feels loved when you hold her hand. Remember when you were dating? You loved to hold her hand, went for a walk, going to the movies. It means a lot today when you take her hand as you're walking along. Next, when you hug her. Recently, we were reflecting on when Joy was 3 or 4, she was not feeling very well, and she said to Emerson, "Daddy, I don't feel very good. Would you come lay down with me?" So he went and laid down with her, and then she goes, "Daddy, I need a hug." And he said, "Oh, so that's really what the situation was. You just need some hugging." She goes, "Yes, and you should have known that." And guess what? She was instantly healed. Men, hugs work wonders. So if starting at 3 or 4, they know that they need hugs, trust me, we need hugs. This summer when Jonathan and Sarah got married, in his vows to her, he said, "Sarah, I promise to hug you even when I don't feel like it." And at first I thought, oh, well, that's kind of interesting you said that. And then I realized this is about meeting a person's deepest need. This is about meeting another person's deepest need. And he realized, I don't need hugs like Sarah needs hugs. And so I'm going to work at giving her something that she needs more than I do. So that really came home to me. Next, when you're affectionate without sexual intentions. Let me repeat that. When you are affectionate without sexual intentions, you know that it's been said that sexual intimacy begins at breakfast. Well, this is one of the ways it does. When you are affectionate without sexual intentions, you can start by giving her a hug, maybe hold her hand sometime throughout the day. Next, under the area of openness, a woman feels an openness with you, meaning you aren't secretly mad at her, and therefore feels loved when you share your feelings. Now, men, we know that you will never share your feelings as much as we do, but when you do, we feel loved and we feel an openness with you. When you tell her about your day, if you're burdened about something, reassure her that it doesn't have anything to do with her and that perhaps after you've unwound for a while, you'll share with her something just so that she feels a part of that. And she'll just feel loved. Next, when you talk without harshness, guardedness, or grunting. Might I add, no newspaper, no computer, no TV. That's where grunting occurs the most, if you're talking. And under that area of harshness, I think because men are so bottom line with one another, sometimes you don't realize how you come across when you are saying something just in what would be to you a normal conversation. But if you see the spirit of your wife deflate in a conversation, that might be just one little clue that you've come across in a harsh way. Ask yourself, how do you want your future son-in-law to treat your daughter? How do you want him to speak to her? Or the son-in-law that's married to your daughter today? And men, ask yourself this question: am I speaking to my daughter and my wife in a harsh way? Do I see my wife and my daughter's spirit deflate when I talk to them in certain ways? It could be a clue right there. Understanding. A woman feels understood or that you empathize with her and therefore feels loved when you listen to her. As Emerson mentioned last night, we came to that point where he would just ask me, do you need a solution? or do you need me to listen to you? And that alleviated a lot of unnecessary conflict in our relationship. A couple years ago, Jonathan gave a set of CDs to his friend Tim, who had been dating a gal for a couple years. And after a couple weeks, Tim called Jonathan. He said, Jonathan, I listened to those CDs from your mom and dad. He goes, they just nailed this thing. He goes, in fact, the other day, I called my girlfriend, and she started unloading to me about something, and I was just ready to give her a solution. And then I stopped, and I said, do you need me to listen to you, or do you need a solution? He goes, it worked. And then a few weeks later, he asked her to marry him, so he must have really thought it was going to work. And then he did marry her. And this summer, he was a groomsman in Jonathan's wedding, and I said, Tim, I'm sharing that all over the country. I got his permission after I'd already done it. I knew he really wouldn't care. Next, repeat back what she sometimes says so she knows you are listening. Emerson's rendition of spider webbing that he did last night, he does that so well because he's lived with me for so long. I still do it very well. I'm still learning. And in fact, one time recently, I was speaking to him, and all of a sudden I saw this glaze come over his eyes. And I said, honey, I don't think you're listening to me. And he kind of came to, and he said, well, Sarah, maybe if ever so often you took a breath. He said it very lovingly, but that was when I thought, you know what? I realized this with my boys. I see this with Emerson. And so that day I realized, you know what? I need to save the longer version for my girlfriends, and I need to save the Cliff Notes for my husband and my sons. In fact, I think it was over Christmas when we were together as a family, Joy was telling this story at the table. And she started spider webbing, and all of a sudden David goes, bzzz, time's up. And we started laughing. I said, that'll preach. Next, express appreciation for her contribution and her different roles she plays by saying, I couldn't do your job. For me as a stay-at-home mom, on many days when I felt like a failure as a mother, I will never forget this one day when Emerson said to me, Sarah, if I had your job, I'd be in prison. I was so encouraged. I mean, I felt so understood. I felt so loved. Now, I wasn't encouraged that he would go to prison if he was, had my job, but it was just amazing how it just lifted my spirits when he said that. I have a friend who received a card from her husband one day just thanking her for all the menial tasks that she does inside the home and outside the home. And it was like 12 to 15 things. And we were in a prayer group at that time, and she showed me the card. She goes, I'm going to stick this in my Bible, and I'm going to read it on a regular basis. She felt so loved. And it was just a simple thing of her husband taking some time to sit down and just list the things that he was so thankful for. Under the area of peacemaking, men, a woman feels at peace, meaning issues are resolved and therefore feels loved when you admit when you are wrong and apologize by saying, I am sorry, which really is a turn-on to a woman. And an even bigger turn-on is when you add the phrase, will you forgive me? Trust me, she'll think she died and gone to heaven. Now, if you're single here, I would say to you guys, you can practice this on your mother. Or any of these things you can practice on your mom. But about a year ago, David was at our home and he couldn't find his glasses. Came to me and said, Mom, what did you do with my glasses? And I said, oh, I didn't move them. He goes, yeah, I think you did. He said, I can't find them. And he was starting to get a little edgy to his voice. And so I looked at him and I said, well, as soon as I finish here, I will go look for him. As soon as he took off, I prayed, Lord, please help him find those glasses. Because I think I'm sometimes losing my mind, but I was pretty sure I had not moved those glasses. About 5 minutes later, he comes to the door with a smile on his face and he said, Mom, I found them in my golf bag. And then he looked at me and he said, Mom, I'm sorry, I came across as unloving. Will you forgive me? I said, sure. Made my day, that's all I can say. Keep the relationship up to date, resolve the unresolved, and don't say forget it. Who do we most often hear saying I'm sorry, little girls or little boys? I'm sure you would say little girls. They say I'm sorry when they trip over the dog. And who do we most often see forgetting it and moving on? Little boys. I can tell you the number of times when my boys, I thought were killing each other, and I would come running to help them resolve this issue, and tell them to say they were sorry, and ask forgiveness. But there were so many times I didn't get there in time. And I will remember this one day when I got to the kitchen, and they were in the backyard playing baseball. And I thought to myself, I thought I would find one of them dead here in the kitchen. And they were out there, and I thought to myself, they don't seem to have a root of bitterness. They seem happy. And then I stood there and I thought, you know what? Neither one of them was personalizing this. They just moved on. Guess what? Little boys and little girls grow up and get married. And guess who most often we hear saying, I'm sorry, and guess who most often can forget it and move on? Well, I think you would agree with me. Little girls are saying, I'm sorry, and little boys. So guess what? We've been doing this since childhood. So is one of us wrong? Or are we just different? As a pastor's wife for nearly 20 years, I cannot tell you the number of times that women would come to me and say, I have never heard my husband say, I'm sorry. If I could just hear him say, I'm sorry, she would thought she'd died and gone to heaven. And so then, again, I thought to myself, we've been doing this since childhood. So I started really processing it. And guys, I guess I would say to you that one of the reasons that women often get historical is because we think there's so many issues that are unresolved. And even though it's easy for you to forget it and move on, this is one thing that's really important to us, is that issues are resolved. And so I guess I would say to you, to give you a little clue, I kind of referred to it earlier about the harshness thing. If you see your wife's spirit deflate in a conversation, or obviously in a conflict most likely, that would probably be one of those times when you could just easily help resolve that conflict. And again, just say, I'm sorry, I came across as unloving, will you forgive me? It's simple, it really is, and yet I know that it's not something that you're used to doing. It's because, again, you weren't doing it when you were little boys. It just was not there. But again, this is what we need, and it's about meeting the need, the deepest need in somebody else. And so this is also where we need to give each other the freedom to, again, use these vocabulary words where we say, that felt unloving, or that felt disrespectful. Did I come across as unloving? Did I come across as disrespectful? But again, men, if you will do this, it is powerful, it works, and the reason I can say that is because I'm a woman, and it works every single time. Let me ask you this, again, how do you want your future son-in-law or the son-in-law who's married to your daughter today to treat her? Do you want, she's going to have the same needs as your wife, the very same needs, whether she's a little girl now or an adult. Now, women, I want to ask you this. If your husband sought your forgiveness, whether it was a small issue or whether it was a huge issue, could he trust you to drop it? Could he trust you to forget it and to move on? I love Proverbs 31 where it says, the heart of her husband trusts in her. Could your husband trust your heart? That if he came to you and again sought your forgiveness, whether it was a little thing or whether it was a big thing, that you would not bring it up, that you wouldn't get historical? If God doesn't get historical, should we? God's good at dropping it and forgetting it. Next, pray after a hurtful time. It's a simple form of spiritual leadership, and it can be huge. Again, we're not asking you to have an hour-long Bible study with us every day, but when you pray with us, that is just, it means so much to us. Whether, again, it's after a hurtful time, or whether it's an issue in the family, or maybe a work issue. And again, it doesn't have to be a long time, but again, men, you can take that leadership. We'd appreciate it. Under the area of loyalty, a woman feels your loyalty, meaning you are completely committed, and therefore feels loved when you don't look at other women. Job made a covenant with his eyes. Men, if you've never done that, I would challenge you to do that. And if you choose to do that, that you would make yourself accountable to another man, and even better yet, tell your wife that you've chosen to do that. She will truly feel loved, and she will really feel a sense of loyalty from you. One thing I've noticed in our culture is that many men do not wear wedding rings. And one time I decided to interview 3 of my godly friends' husbands, who are godly men, who did not wear wedding rings, because I was curious as to why they didn't. I knew they had great relationships, and so I asked them, and 3 answers I got were that because of intramural sports, because of my job, and because I've gained a little weight over the years. And so then I just challenged them, because I've noticed that men's wedding rings do not cost quite as much as women's wedding rings. And so I said to them, if you need a couple different sizes because of that weight gain or weight loss, get some. And then also I said, if you need to put it on or take it off for those various activities, I would ask you to do that. I had a man come up to me after the conference once, and he said he had watched the video conference before he had come to the conference. And after watching the video, he said, I went to my bedroom and put on my wedding ring that I had not had on for 40 years. I said, yes, I was so excited. Also, guys, recently I was watching a sports channel where two very well-known sportscasters had on wedding rings. I cannot tell you how much respect I had for those men. Now, I can't tell you they were committed to their marriage, but I can tell you they were saying something with those wedding rings that were flashing to the world. Next, speak only positive things about her before family and friends. No airing of dirty laundry. Never. Third one, do not bring up the D word, meaning divorce. Men, if you use this as a club, I would just say to you as a man of honor, please do not go there, but are committed till death do us part. Over the years, I've heard many stories of loyalty, even like the one that Emerson read last night. But one that I heard just about a year or so ago was told to me by a woman about her in-laws. And she said that her mother-in-law had, after 50 years of marriage, had a stroke. And she had been in rehab for about 3 months. And after the rehab, she came home. She was almost in a coma. She didn't really recognize anybody, and she was really in a vegetative state. She was sitting there. Her hair was messy. Osteoporosis had set in, and the beginning stages of Alzheimer's had set in. Across the room from her sat her husband, and he looked at her, and he said, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Well, Rainey, here we go. Fast forward 10 years. This man contracted pancreatic cancer a little over a year ago. And he would go for treatments. And when he would go for treatments, his daughter-in-law would come and take care of her mother-in-law. And she would always give her a bath. She would fix her hair. She would put some blush on her, put some lipstick on her, fix her hair, and put on a pretty sweater. And this one day when her husband came back from his treatment, he walked in and his daughter-in-law said, take a look. And he looked at her and he said, that's my Rainey. Go get a mirror and let her see how pretty she looks. I thought to myself, there's a man who has unconditionally loved his wife for 60 years. I'm always challenged by stories like this because I think to myself, am I living my life in such a way in my home that if that happened to me, my husband would still see the same woman that he married? That man died last summer of pancreatic cancer, and I thought to myself, he died an honorable man. I would ask you men, are you loving your wife in such an unconditional way that you would follow this man's example? Women, if you're sitting here and thinking, my husband might not find joy in taking care of me, just begin again. It's a new day. Under the area of esteem, a woman feels esteemed, that you treasure her above all others, and therefore feels loved when you verbally support and honor her in front of the children or anyone. For example, Emerson was always so appreciative of my cooking through the years. And when my children were little, he would, every night, he would just thank me for the dinner. And it was just so neat. It was just so honoring. And when my boys were younger, they weren't as appreciative. But I noticed as they got older, they began saying that too. And one day I thought to myself, life, as they say, is often caught and not taught. And so I thought, they're really following in his example there. I also think of how through the years, if my kids were, speaking disrespectfully to me or something, Emerson would say, that's my girlfriend. And she is always going to be my girlfriend. And someday you're going to be gone, and we are going to have a good time. And so you quit speaking to her that way. And in fact, Joy's freshman year in college, she said, I think you and Dad are having way too much fun without us. Next, praise her for what she does, whether in the home or outside the home. And this can be in various forms, but a couple years ago, I was at the wedding of a college friend's daughter, and her husband's a pastor, and he was performing the ceremony. And at one point in the ceremony, he said to his daughter, Christy, there will be many times throughout your marriage that you will find it difficult to respect Oliver. And when those times come, I just have one suggestion. Call your mom and ask her what she did. Oh, that was pretty powerful. Now, men, I'm assuming most of you are not pastors and you will not have the opportunity to publicly